Cade Klubnik had one of the worst games in his career. Can he fix it? We'll talk about it right here on Locked on Clemson.
You are Locked on Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here. Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked on Clemson, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked on Clemson your first listen of the day. We're part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. And big salute out there to my everydayers. Thank you so much. You know how we do it here on Locked on. Exclusive Clemson content Monday through Friday every single week. And if you're new to the show, welcome in. 75% of viewers are not yet subscribed. So what are you waiting for? Hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Cade Klubnik had one of the worst games of his Clemson career. But that's not the end of the story. Dabo Swinney says the team will go on and they will move and improve as Cade goes. And now the pressure is on him to respond as a leader. Now, Cade missed, according to Dabo Swinney, some very routine mistakes and routine basic reads and progressions, held on the ball too long, left clean pockets. Dabo mentioned that he didn't feel as if LSU did too much as far as exotic pressures. And many of the sacks, well, two of the sacks were really, when you go back at it, very, very much so self-inflicted. And that's really where the concern lies. You know, a lot of people have been talking to me about this, and a lot of fans have called in on the radio and reminded me that this is Cade Klubnik's senior year. And there's a lot of people who believe that Cade will just settle in and progressively get better as the season goes on. What we have seen more often than not is it's really more of an up and down for Cade depending on the situation. We don't actually have proof that he progressively gets better as the season goes on. We think that is the case because we have a sample that we keep going back to in our mind of a recency bias, that the Texas game in the second half is that game that is really the true Cade. But what we know is that he made mistakes against Louisville. He made mistakes against South Carolina. He made mistakes against Georgia. So all throughout the season, it was up and down. It wasn't, if you look at his rating, quarterback rating, it was not consistently getting better or improving. And that was my big question on the radio last night was, is it truly that he just can't get over the hump, or he hasn't figured out how to get over the hump? Or is it truly that it's not a hump at all and it is just a ceiling? He is stuck. This is the best he can do. This is the God-given talent he has. We're saying that he's going to improve, and as the team goes, he will go. But we really don't know that for sure. We're going back to another big-time game where routine mistakes are being made. Game-changing plays, as Dabo Swinney mentioned, are being missed. There was a 3rd and 12 where Tyler Brown was wide open for a 50-yard touchdown. Cade left the read early and scrambled instead. There was a red zone play where Tyler Brown was open again for a game-tying score, and Cade Klubnik ran and ignored that was what the play was going to open up to. He's missing things, and he has multiple examples where one correct read will change the outcome. Now, Dabo believes that there's a silver lining to all this, that Cade will respond, the team will correct their biggest issue, and they will have more success in the difficult games, and everything will be all right. To me, It matters because the offense is built around the quarterback. It's built around Cade Klubnik. He does need to improve and get better. When he struggles, the entire team struggles. Now, thankfully, you have Troy coming up, but nobody really cares about Troy. I mean, you're caring about Troy in the sense of you want to see improvement. You want to see more discipline. You want to see the things that you saw week one get corrected. But there's still that lingering part of, have we seen now over multiple games, multiple samples sizes, a larger sample size now of 2 full seasons with Garrett Riley. Have we seen that this is just what to expect of Cade Klubnik? And I know it's sometimes easy to say, oh, well, you could just fix those 2 plays and you'd have 14 points right there. Clemson could have possibly won the game, could have possibly been in the, top 5, top 3 of the country after a win like that. But what I start to feel is that Cade can't really make that leap. I start to feel as if he may get a little bit better as the season goes on, and there may be games that he gets a little bit worse as the season goes. I don't know if we can ever say that he's going to just consistently be better and we can count on that. He's going to win a lot of games this season. Clemson is talented enough to win a lot of games. Clemson's talented enough to win the majority of their ACC games. But this season and the schedule is more difficult. Can Cade actually do it? Maybe, he can do it against other teams that might be difficult games, but not LSU difficult. But the problem is we're seeing some success from Florida State, some success from Georgia Tech, and we're seeing success at South Carolina. Those 3 teams that are all on the board this season that are not going to be easy to just get over the hump with those teams. They're going to want to be fighting and challenging Clemson as well. Week 1 was up against a really good opponent in LSU. I think that, to expect Cade to just progressively get better and the season go on, I'm not really seeing it. I don't feel a lot of confidence in that. I lean more towards we now have seen Cade in enough games, in enough average team games, enough easy team games, and enough difficult team games to where we kind of know what we're going to get from Cade. And unfortunately, the problem is you're going to get inconsistency from Cade. He makes some great plays. He really does. When he stays in the pocket, when he keeps his footwork steady and calm, and he's confident there, and he takes the hit, he makes some good throws. He makes good decisions. He can see things. But there are also many times where he thinks he can outrun every single person on the field, and he just can't. He thinks he can scramble and get away from anybody, and he just can't. He thinks he can scramble always to the right, and nobody will pick up on that, and they do. He thinks that he can roll away from the blocking scheme, and you can't do that. That really disrupts everything. And he also feels as if he can make the hero play pre-snap, even when the defense is showing him something completely different. That's what we're seeing from Cade. There's a lot of tendencies that defenses have obviously picked up on, and the most elite defenses have picked up on it. I mean, it's almost easy for them to play against Cade because they know that he's going to revert back to these things. Unfortunately, this is his senior season, and this is it. So if he's not going to figure something out, then we're going to see more of this. Dabo said, Cade has to be a dude. If he's not a dude, they're not winning. And dudes got to be dudes because this is big boy football. Not only is it big boy football, but Cade Klubnik is making a lot of money. He's making a lot of money to play football, and he's got to do better than what we're seeing because this is people's hard-earned money donating to a program to see him lead the team to success, not panic when the game gets difficult. Now, I know there's a lot of other things going on, and I'll talk about it in segment 2 about how Clemson can possibly scheme and improve. And maybe the execution was problems because of the scheme, but we'll also kind of do a chicken and egg here and talk about, was it the scheme and execution, or was it the execution and scheme? Which one really faltered first or hurt the one over the other on Locked On Clemson? Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more 2025 IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August, and has an elite focus on athletes in every single detail. Mazda does the same as athletes, from metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather. They put in the work where they need to make the best possible product out there. It's the small details that make the big plays for Mazda, and it's just like that and more for all the athletes out there. There's more to a vehicle. There's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Hey, we have an important request for you. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer questions about our advertising. Go over to lockedonpodcast.com/survey and get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. Clemson's offensive collapse wasn't really about scheme or Garrett Riley's playbook in a lot of ways. But in some ways, it was about scheme and Garrett Riley's playbook. On the other hand, it was a lot about execution as well. LSU really didn't surprise Clemson with anything that they were throwing at them, per Dabo Swinney. But as the coach says, the Clemson Tigers beat themselves on the basic plays. They could not rise to the occasion, even though they had plenty of opportunities. So the question that I posed before we went to break is it scheme? Is it execution? And, you know, while LSU may not have brought anything that shocked Clemson, the pressures, the fronts, the coverages, they may have seen that or prepared for that. They may have expected those things, but in some ways, the offensive line didn't feel that way. It felt as if they weren't prepared for some of the speed and athleticism that they had on the outside. Now, Dabo will tell us that they were expecting it, but in a lot of ways, it felt like they weren't. And so that concerns me from the offensive line. There were a few different twists and stunts that were done that were very, I don't want to say basic, because that takes away from the skill and the talent that LSU has, but it wasn't anything extremely exotic. And I want to say that in a way that matters a lot to LSU, in the sense that they're extremely talented. So you don't have to do a lot of smoke and mirrors and exotic plays and schemes, because the talent is just sheerly there. And they outperformed Clemson's offensive line. They outperformed the quarterback and were able to get pressure and were able to win the game. Cade Klubnik, you know, as we mentioned, held on to the ball too long, drifted out of the pocket when it was clean. He either locked in on one wide receiver only, or he came off his first read too early. You know, he was just extremely inconsistent. And even though it wasn't anything crazy from the pressures, from the fronts, and from the coverages, That's the kind of even more scary thing for me is that Cade, could not recognize those things and rise to the occasion. If you can force Cade to do those things and act the way he acted, if you can force Clemson's offensive line to act the way that they acted on sheer basic defense, that does worry me as the season goes on. But remember how I said execution was a problem? And it was in that sense. So it wasn't anything exotic that disrupted the execution. On the flip side, though, you kind of have to throw a little bit about the scheme in there as well. We're talking about not an exotic defense, no craziness, just sheer talent going up against Clemson's offense. It also caused the staff and Garrett Riley to completely change the game in the running game. Not just change it, but completely abandon it. As I said in the last episode earlier this week, they didn't even use it. And you can say, well, we dominated you and that's why you didn't rush the ball. No, you didn't even really try. They only allowed the running back one carry in the second half. And to me, that's another thing that really is concerning. So you're telling me that they didn't throw anything exotic at you. They threw what they threw at you with coverages and pressures and fronts was exactly what they practiced in before the game, and they expected these things, but then they performed in that way. That to me is pretty bad as far as both execution and scheme. So was one more than the other? Well, if scheme is fine and execution is poor, well, then that's all on the players. Cade Klubnik, the wide receivers, the running backs, the offensive line, they have to be sharper in their fundamentals, in what they've practiced. I mean, if you've coached any kind of team, I've coached little league teams. I mean, you can practice ground ball after ground ball after ground ball after ground ball. But at the end of the day, when the game starts to be played, your infielders have to field the ground ball on their own, as the coach cannot do it for them. They have to make the catches, and you can drill it as much as you want Monday through Friday. But on Saturday, they have to do the fundamentals. They have to do what you practice. They have to, read what they see, and they have to make the catches. Now, there were a lot of contested catches. I, for one, don't knock the wide receivers that they dropped or did not catch a lot of those. I don't count those as drops. To Clemson standard, they do. To the wide receiver standard, they do. For what Dabo Swinney counts, they do. So when Dabo says, well, we had a handful of snaps or more, or drops or more, he's really talking about those contested catches that honestly, I would say were extremely well defended, as well as they missed it. But if you talk to like a TJ Moore or Bryant Wesco, they would say that they are talented enough to catch those. From a fan standpoint, what I've seen with the passing chart is, for a fan, a drop is really more about an egregious mistake by the wide receiver, not a bang play, not a contested play, not a batted ball, not a pass defended. And, so that is where the disconnect is. When you look at my chart, I only really had one, pass that I said was a drop, and that was the over the shoulder to Bryant Wesco. Dabo had like 6, I think, so it's a little bit different in expectation there. And I understand that from a coaching standpoint. If the scheme is fine, then it really is on the players. And I think when you look back at LSU, a lot of it can be attributed to the players. And if you're an offensive coordinator, it's frustrating, because if you have inconsistent play from your key playmakers, how can you possibly scheme up anything? Now, on the flip side, if the scheme's the issue, then Garrett Riley has to do better to redesign Clemson's offense to be able to adjust to the attack on defense. And I will also say that needs to improve. Garrett Riley really didn't make any adjustments against LSU. Garrett Riley really didn't do anything, in my opinion, to subdue, or I guess what I would say more like hide the weaknesses of Clemson. The best thing that you can do as a schemer is to try to make your weaknesses look non-existent and really amplify your strengths. When you look at what Sloan did with LSU, I feel like he did that. He amplified their strengths and he kind of downplayed their weaknesses and focused on what they could do well and run effectively. The truth is, it lies in the middle. So if you blame the scheme, you're right. If you blame execution, you're right. It really was a little bit of both. Dabo's comments put up a spotlight a little bit more this week, in my opinion, than I've ever heard of him kind of spotlighting the players. And I think it kind of goes back to the fact that we all know that Cade Klubnik is his senior year. This is it for him. This is supposed to be the most returning production of all teams in college football, and they come out like that, especially if you're a coach and you know you've hit 1,000 ground balls to your shortstop, and then when the game comes, they goes right through their legs. I kind of got that vibe from Dabo Swinney as well. He came out and said, hey, we ran these plays. We in practice, we practiced for this. We told them this was going to happen. We told them this is how they need to be ready for it. And they still didn't execute. That's, to me, goes back to maybe there is just a ceiling for this team that is led by Cade Klubnik. You know, it may be a team that just can't win the biggest of big games on the national stage. Maybe they win 9 games, maybe they win 10 games, but there's not a lot of proof for me that this team led by Cade could actually get all the way to the national championship. I know we said that preseason, we were really hyped on that, but when you see what you see, you have to admit what you see. And what we see right now is that there's just proof that there are a good team with a lot of talent, with a lot of guys that you'd love to have on any team in the country, but they just together aren't able to figure it out. And this is the second year in the row that they're just not able to figure it out against the teams that have an identity on defense. All right, so last segment, we're going to talk about the Pro Football Focus player grades, who had high grades, who had low grades, and do I agree or disagree with those? The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I'm telling you, that's more than I've seen since I've started here at Locked On. You want to be a part of this and get in on the action. FanDuel makes every game more exciting. I love watching what I can do over on the fantasy side of things. You get to be invested in more games than one, more teams than one, more players than one. You know, I love Clemson football, but when you do things on FanDuel, you can get really invested in all these other teams and really see what's going on at a high level in the college football world or in the NFL or baseball or whatever. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app today by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com, and place your first $5 bet today. This episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's your 401k, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, and you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Speaking of spreadsheets, I looked over on my Google Sheets. I've had so many that have just been filled with a bunch of errors. You don't have to deal with that and do it all by yourself. Monarch Money can help you with that. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Before we get into the next segment, I've got to tell you, you're missing out if you're not already part of the Locked On Clemson Insider program. We've been having some great conversations over there lately, and it's a complete text line directly with me. You can share your takes and thoughts and ask questions. I can give you my insider information. Plus, you get access to me and special mailbag episodes and all insider discussions all season long. There's even a 14-day free trial. So if you try it out and you love it, you can stick with it. If you don't, that's okay. You can keep going. So there's no excuse not to try it out and get in on the action. There's a link in the description, so don't miss it. All right, final segment of the show. Thank you so much, all the everydayers out there, for sticking with me through the very end. LSU wasn't just about a few bad plays. When you look at the film, the Pro Football Focus talked about what they thought were they graded out the best players and the worst players from the game. Clemson's defense played at an extremely high level, and that was recorded with Pro Football Focus, and they agreed and they gave higher grades to the defense overall. The offense, as we've mentioned, a lot of wasted scheming, wasted efforts, wasted execution, and just overall poor game plan, poor execution, and a losing effort for sure. One thing that when I look at Pro Football Focus, I like the way they do things. I like how they grade things, but it is just their opinion, and so I'm not 100% sure if I agree with everything. But we'll kind of go through and I'll give you some of the top performers for sure. So Olsen Pat Henry was one of the top performers for Clemson on the offensive side of the ball. He really didn't get a ton of opportunities, but when he did get those, he did well. On the offensive line, I'm terrible at grading offensive lines because I really don't know a ton about what the scheme was, what the blocking setup was, what they were expected to do. All I know is, did they block anybody? And a lot of times against LSU, unfortunately, was less true than other games. But Harris Sewell, he got graded a little bit higher. Blake Miller got graded higher. I'm not really sure about Blake Miller. I've told you this many times. I don't know if he's ever convinced me that he's an all ACC person. I don't think that his style of blocking works well with Cade Klubnik. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. I don't think he's necessarily a bad offensive lineman. I just feel like more often than not, him and Cade Klubnik aren't on the same page and they aren't working well together. And even though he gets some solid blocks in the passing game, Cade rolls out to the right almost exclusively. And so if and when Blake Miller blocks inside out, Cade's going to be 50-50 if he doesn't just run and basically be the anti to that blocking scheme. And I'm trying to think of the word, but really just kind of negating, that's what I'm looking for, negating anything that Blake Miller does and the efforts that he puts in. So Adam Randall also graded pretty high as far as the team as a whole. I mean, he had limited touches, but I told you that the touches that he had 2 first downs and a touchdown. So to me, you don't have to do much to convince me that he should have been more involved. We know that. Cade was graded pretty low. We've already talked about that on this show and previous episodes, just the disappointment factor from Cade Klubnik being a senior. He's just got to be better. Can he do so and actually be consistent with it? You already know my doubts with that too, as well. The running game, really hard to grade anything from there just because they weren't used as much. The biggest concern, is that Clemson didn't have a ton of offensive snaps. So it makes it even harder to grade because, 1 or 2 mistakes, and that's a lot when it comes to your snap count of 58. So Clemson was forced into being one-dimensional. They didn't run the ball, and so that hurt them even more. So you had maybe 40 or so pass plays that they weren't very executing at a high level. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, one thing that was kind of interesting to me was Cade Denhoff. A lot of fans don't like Cade Denhoff, but he got the highest team grade. I'm not sure how I feel about that. other than I do remember when I was watching and I was recording for the LSU passing chart, I do remember Cade was out there. Cade Denhoff was out there, and he wasn't really getting eaten up by any blocks. He was doing pretty good to hold off on the outside edge, much better than he did last season, if you will. Steph Island Green was graded pretty high. I thought that was kind of shocking that he came out as a starter for the first game of the season, and he really got a good amount of opportunities over DeMonte Capehart. So for all the hype for Capehart, it kind of goes back to Steph Island Green was the man. Another one that was a standout was Ronan Hannafin. I talked about him on the post-game show. Ronan Hannafin really shocked me because, one, you don't want your safety to have the most tackles in a game. That's atrocious defense. So we know that that's the case, or we at least know that they gave up some pretty, gashing plays here and there. It was more of a bend, don't break for Clemson's defense, which we're perfectly fine with. We've noticed that even with the Brent Venables of the world, and we'll take bend, don't break all day. And Ronan Hannafin was in there. I love Ronan Hannafin mainly because he's taller, he's a safety, and he's kind of like the safety version of Sammy Brown. Not saying skill-wise or talent-wise, even though I do think he's skilled and talented. But Ronan Hannafin's just in on the ball. Anywhere the ball was, I felt like they did well, and Ronan Hannafin got there. Clemson's defensive front, while they didn't have a big stat sheet day, they were graded well. Peter Woods was graded well. Sammy Brown was graded well. There's a lot of physicality in there. I will say this, when you go back and look at Peter Woods, he was fighting a ton, but while he was fighting through things, he just never could get in on the ball. And some of that is because we mentioned it on the radio. LSU was 15 of 15 from behind the line of scrimmage. Out of 28 completions, 15 of those were not even past the line of scrimmage. And then I think 22 out of 28 were less than 6 yards. So as you can tell, Sloan and the LSU offense were dinking and dunking Clemson all day, and it was working. So they've got to figure out, if another team does that and uses that as a blueprint, how are they going to adjust and be more consistent on the defensive side of the ball? Bend, don't break worked really well until they got a couple of penalties, and that was led to the touchdown. But overall, I would say the defense improved in areas and ways they needed to improve, and Tom Allen has proven, at least so far, that it was a good hire. On the other side, on offense, again, it's still the battle of, is it scheme or execution? Is it the chicken or the egg? It's a little bit of both, and we could debate for hours on which is more important or which is having more of a negative effect on the team. But at the end of the day, one of those things has to improve. So whether it's the team and the players and Cade, as Dabo is confident in that they'll get better, improves their execution, or whether it's Garrett Riley just schemes better. To me, I lean more on the fact that Garrett Riley can make better changes than some teaching old dog new tricks like the seniors trying to do something better than what we saw. I appreciate everyone being a part of the show. Thank you so much. As we continue this, we get ready for the Troy game and kind of wanting to see a reset of the team and those things that we missed from week one, we want to see them improve against Troy in week 2. Hey, this is another big moment for Locked On as well. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview show. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. All college football preview show. A college football preview show only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday through the season, only on Fire TV. And to my everydayers, thank you so much for hanging with me to the very end of the show. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you at the top of the hill.